Number 9 gets a star. And that one goes with 35, 45, and 46. Number 11 gets 3 stars. And I should tell you which parts because that was a really long study goal. In number 11, the College Board always asks about the composition of the Earth's crust, core, and whole Earth. Also, my students often get confused about those procedures which shuffle the geological deck. So my students often get confused about tectonics versus volcanoes versus the different types of erosion, weathering. So just heads up on those details. Number 14 gets a star. And there's a great example in number 33. Additionally, make sure you know the 5 most common strategic metals, and make sure you know what bauxite is. Number 15 gets 3 stars. And please look up. There's a great example of illegal gold mining in number 53. There's a cool article about how mountaintop removal is becoming more difficult because of new laws. In article number 34, I would recommend that you should know which resources use which type of mining and which resources use which type of processing. Finally, please remember that this can be done carefully today if we legislate air quality controls. This can be done carefully as long as nothing goes wrong. It's the accidents that make this so bad. And remember that this is illegal in the first world. We're still cleaning up from when this was legal in the past. And also, this is still used in many off-the-map gold mines, like in the tropics or in Mongolia. Yeah?
Just to clarify, mercury nomination is just for gold.
Just to clarify, as far as I understand, mercury amalgamation just works for gold. That said, I know that mercury can form an amalgam with many other metals. So you may be able, I just know of it for gold. It could, I don't know, maybe. But all I know about gold. Yeah. This can be done carefully as long as there's no accidents. The problem is the accident, not the fundamental practice. Number 17 gets a star, and it goes with 42 through 44. 19 gets a star. And there are 4 articles that are relevant to e-waste, 49 through 52. By the way, how many of you think it's helpful when I tell you to associate study goals together? And how many of you think it's not really a helpful way to use our time in class? In number 20, make sure that you know what brown fields are. These are abandoned sites with industrial contamination. Like Caroline's paint factory goes bankrupt, nobody notices that she shuttered the facility and sold off the dirt. Now we've got ground that is contaminated by her rusty leftover paint barrels, and there's no one responsible for them. We call that an abandoned site with industrial contamination, or a brownfield. Study goal number 21. As you can see on the board, contains a whole bunch of content. We will discuss this in class today, but the idea gets a couple of stars. '23 gets 1 star, and I'd like to add one bit of info to number 23 now. 60% of American landfill volume is biodegradable. Why doesn't it biodegrade? There's not enough oxygen or water in the landfill. So you can dig up newspapers that are 100 years old and read them cover to cover. Well, the moisture is still missing, so is the bacteria. And the funny thing about anaerobic bacteria is that they often depend on aerobic bacteria. So usually, if you haven't had aerobic bacteria for an extended period of time, it's less likely that anaerobics will be present either. Number 25 gets 2 stars about sanitary landfills. And you can see up on the board that 25 goes with 3, 4, and 39. Number 27 gets 1 star. And I'd like to add something now to number 27. It's called the 5 Ps. These are the most hazardous polluting industries. The 5 Ps, like the letter P. You may have heard this in my class before. They are plastics, pharmaceuticals, petroleum, pesticides, and paint/pigment. Those 5 industries, the 5 Ps, are the most hazardous polluters in our global economy and our American economy. Number 28 gets 2 stars. And I don't plan to talk about it because your book does a great job. I've never lectured about number 28. I'll leave you to do your homework. I'll tell you now that it's very important. In the reader, I'd like to give you a quick comment about each of those readings. 30 is just for personal interest. 31, I'd like to discuss a teeny bit. You may remember we talked about the problem of water pollution in mining. Because the dirt has been underground for so long, when you bring it into contact with oxygen, you'll get oxides that mix with water to make acid drainage. Now, in number 31, they talk about some problems when you contain that water. You can either use what are called tailing ponds or impoundment dams to contain the acid mine drainage. And what? Mine drainage, the water that comes from a mine. That could be polluted with hydrocarbons in a coal mine, with heavy metals in a cadmium mine, or just with acids in almost any mine. But those liquids present a variety of problems that's discussed in number 31. Is probably just an interesting thing that neither of us had thought about before. Number 33 is a great example of strategic metals affecting the global economy. Number 34 is about new limits to mountaintop removal. Number 35 is a neat detail for study goal number 9. Here comes a huge hint. Please look up. These articles, number 36 through 43, add up to something like 8 study goals in 3 pages. That's a lot of content in a small space. I think it's really useful. Number 44 gets 2 stars. Santa Barbara County is awesome. I'd like to talk a little bit about number 47, because if you could please look up, there's a lot of details about incinerators. Now listen carefully. The worst way to deal with garbage is to light it on fire. What we should do instead, the best way to deal with garbage, is to light it on fire. More carefully. I have a neighbor who doesn't pay for trash pickup. He just lights his garbage on fire. And he just throws piles of trash in front of the barn until the piles get big, and then he lights them on fire. It's horrifying. I can see the black smoke clouds at his house on West Camino from the beach at Henry's. It is stunning, the black cloud of death that rises from his property whenever he decides to burn his garbage. And, by the way, that's how the United States used to deal with most of its garbage. That's how many countries today still deal with the majority of their garbage. It's like a leading method of disposal globally. The secret is, if you just burn garbage, you're going to get incomplete combustion, gasification, toxic particulates, and toxic emissions. Funny thing is, if you just burn it at a higher temperature with carefully blended gas injection, you can get complete combustion And the emissions are relatively insignificant as long as you filter the particulates. So you can make a high-tech incinerator, which has all these sensors, and they have tanks of carbon gas, oxygen,